I'm Shane Phillips, the CEO of the Phillips Group, and we're here at the HR Summit and Expo, #1 HR event in the Middle East. And I'm here with Michael Skapinker, one of the leading journalists with the Financial Times, and also the chief editor of their JV Headspring. Welcome. Thank you.
Good to meet you, Shane. Thank you.
Good to meet you. So we were just talking off camera about how one of the things you find very interesting is how leadership is changing now.
I think what has changed, leaders have always had to be aware of their business, they've had to be aware of the competition, they've had to know about their sector. I think the real change, and we've seen this over the past decade or so, there have been so many geopolitical changes that are affecting the way in which business operates. Chief executives have also had to become politically very astute, very aware. They've had to be aware of the changing nature of international relations. Just to take one example, the dispute between Donald Trump and China over trade. That is something they've had to be aware of. They've had to be aware of what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in Africa. Political events have a big impact on what happens to businesses now, and I think that's a skill and a knowledge that CEOs have had to develop.
Right, and I think more so here in the Middle East, where you have a lot of volatility and change afoot even as we speak.
Yes.
And so what are you seeing? How are they adapting to this change, or how is that change actually playing out in the type of CEO that we're seeing being successful?
I think the word, Shane, that you used, the word volatility, really describes it. We had a period, let's say after 1989, when the Berlin Wall came down, the end of the Cold War, we seem to be entering an area of great stability. That stability has gone. We see this all over the world now. We see street demonstrations throughout the world. We're seeing them in Chile, we're seeing them in Hong Kong, we're seeing them in Lebanon at the moment. CEOs need to be really alert. So when you ask what do CEOs need to do, first of all, they need to become much more aware of what's happening. They need to read the news. If I may say, they need to be reading the Financial Times, they need to be listening to television programs. They really need to think, this is happening now, it's interesting, but what is this going to mean for my business? What does this mean for my people? The other thing we need to be aware of, employees are involved in these these changes as well. If there's trouble on the street, if there's social uprising, if there are populist movements, this affects people's employees as well. And I think this is the major difference. It's not enough to be a spectator now. They have to be really, really involved in trying to understand what's happening in the world, because it's going to affect their business. Other examples, I'm based in the UK, Brexit. Really a huge change in the way the UK operates. The UK was always a very pragmatic, gradualist country. Brexit is a massive change, and it's affecting businesses not just in the UK, but in the UK's big trading partners, whether that's Germany in Europe or the big trading partners in the Middle East. Obviously, the UK has got very long-standing trading relations in the Middle East.
So do you feel as a journalist now that part of the CEO's learning and development should be media skills?
Yes, I mean, media skills are important, and you know, they've obviously always been important. I think it's not so much media skills, it's saying, I need to understand more about what's happening in this particular country. I need to understand more about what's happening in the region. Part of that is reading, part of that is understanding, talking to people. I think a very important part of it, very difficult thing for a CEO to do, walk around. Walk around. We talk about management by walking around within the organization. That's a very long established thing. I think there's also understanding by walking around in the country, in the city. You know, put aside your CEO badge, just go out, just walk through the markets, walk through the streets, try to get a feel for what's happening.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Michael. It's been a pleasure listening to you.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you very much.
That was Michael Skapinker, one of the leading journalists, and a journalist with the Financial Times. He's also the head editor of their new JV Headspring, and I'm sure you can read more about him online and on his various papers. I'm your host, Shane Phillips from the Phillips Group, and we're here at the HR Summit and Expo, the leading HR event in the Middle East.